So this presentation is basically a response to Quassim Cassam's proposal that he makes in his book, Conspiracy Theories. Um, it's a particularist critique, and it'll be clear why that is or how that works. And in the end, I'm actually going to offer a kind of Confucian critique as well. Okay, so I'll start with an overview here, and this quotation is I think, a good introduction to his basic ideas. He basically says that conspiracy theories are not really about the truth. Um, for after all, they have virtually no chance of being true, he says. So what they are is political propaganda. Their real function is to promote a political agenda. And that agenda is a right-wing, racist, anti-Semitic agenda. And given this, Cassam emphasizes, in response to conspiracy theories, that what we should do is we should criticize the underlying ideology behind conspiracy theories, taken generally. And we do this by repeatedly retelling the history of conspiracy theories. And in this way, what we're doing is we're outing conspiracy theories as anti-Semitic or right-wing propaganda. Now, this is not just an idea in a book. Some scholars seem to take this seriously, it seems. And in addition, this kind of thing, maybe not this exactly, but similar or analogous strategies are actually relatively pervasive. So I think it's kind of important to look critically at this. Okay. Now, first, we should be clear about what we mean in this particular talk and critique by conspiracy theories. What does Cassam mean by it? Because he, after all, capitalizes it. So it seems like he's talking about something special. Indeed, he suggests that conspiracy theories, capitalized, have 6 special features. And I actually have an article that came out recently where I criticize this aspect of his book. But what I want to point out here is that conspiracy theories capitalized for Cassam really are just the ordinary sense of conspiracy theory. The reason he capitalizes it is to distinguish it from what some other conspiracy theory theorists have talked about conspiracy theories in a broader than normal sense, broader than usual usage sense, where just any theory about a conspiracy. And he's like, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about, what people actually argue about, and what people mean when they use the term, derisively. That's just a conspiracy theory. And so some examples of conspiracy theories are alternative accounts of 9/11 and JFK conspiracy theories. But on Cassam's understanding, this wouldn't include the official account of 9/11, and it wouldn't include petty criminal conspiracies, or conspiracy theories about petty conspiracies. Okay, I'm fine with all of that. I'm just clarifying that that's what he means. It's not a subset of the ordinary idea, but the actual, just the ordinary idea. So, although he doesn't explicitly talk about the assassination of Robert Kennedy or the assassination of Martin Luther King, and his book predates the COVID-19 stuff, still, presumably, the concept would include those kinds of theories. Things with respect to the COVID-19, the theories that are dismissed as conspiracy theories. And I would actually add as well that it should include accusations of NSA and FBI surveillance. I'm thinking about the PRISM program and COINTELPRO prior to their exposure. It doesn't include them now, but prior to their the documents establishing those surveillance programs, accusations of that nature would have counted as a conspiracy theory. They would have been contrarian and speculative and esoteric and mostly put forward by amateurs, etc. Same with the early Watergate investigations. Okay, so that's what he means by conspiracy theories. All of the theories that we mean to include when we say that's just a conspiracy theory, or when somebody says that. Okay. So now let's go through the flow of Cassam's underlying thought. I call it the flow of his thought rather than an argument, because if we look closely at this, we'll see that if this were an argument, at least if it were a deductive argument, it would be one that would be invalid at every step. So we start with the idea that conspiracy theories have the 6 features which he believes that they have. And he thinks that these features render them unlikely to be true. And so, well, I said so, but it's not really, he doesn't explicitly say that that establishes this, but he says that, and then he says they're not really about the truth. And then he asserts that they're really to advance a political agenda. And then he says what the political agenda is the promotion of right-wing racist and anti-Semitic ideologies. And it's not just the racists and anti-Semites that he's worried about here, because he suggests, and this is step 5, and this is kind of a critical point, that they serve, conspiracy theories serve this primary function, regardless of whether the people who espouse them recognize it or not. Okay. Let's go back up to the top here for a moment here, unlikely to be true. I would suggest, and this is what I suggest in the other paper, that he kind of trades on an ambiguity or equivocation here between unlikely to be true and being virtually being impossible for it to be true, virtually no chance of being true. And you can't really get very far with just unlikely to be true. I just want to give a brief example of, let's say you've got a detective and he's got a bunch of leads, and each lead implies a certain theory of the case. And each theory on its own is unlikely to be true. But that doesn't mean that his following up on each lead is not about the truth. He is interested in the truth. And even if, let's say that one lead kind of pans out and he starts to believe, even though he hasn't really fully proven this yet, he starts to believe that this theory of the case is actually true. Now, at this point, it's still speculative to some degree, and let's say it could be contrarian and esoteric. And maybe he's an amateur if that matters, right? So it's still going to fulfill all these, or at least most of these requirements of that seem to be problematic about for Cassam about conspiracy theories. And yet, it can still be about the truth. And in fact, really, these qualities these special features only make something unlikely to be true prima facie. It could be that after investigating a little bit and finding some specific evidence that even though that it's esoteric and contrarian and maybe still speculative, but at a certain point it could become likely to be true. at least according to some reasonable estimate of a person who really is concerned about the truth and not just trying to advance an agenda. Okay, so based on that analysis of what conspiracy theories are, his proposal is that we should respond to them politically. They're political in nature themselves, so it seems appropriate to respond to them politically. And how we do this is by shaming and embarrassing people for flirting with them, right? And this is an appeal to emotions. And Cassam is explicit that this is a good idea because passions are more powerful than reasons. And besides, conspiracy theories are not about the truth anyway, so it's kind of justified in a fire with fire, fight fire with fire kind of thinking. Okay, and so the idea is that we out conspiracy theories as anti-Semitic or right-wing propaganda. And the more specific way we do this is by emphasizing the historical connections between conspiracy theories and right-wing racist and anti-Semitic ideologies. Now, he does go through some examples and clearly there are anti-Semitic, especially conspiracy theories that can be pointed to. Okay, but the point of repeatedly pointing to these right-wing racist and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and the ideologies that go with them, the point of doing that is that at least some people can be dissuaded from flirting with such theories. Now, what kind of people are going to be dissuaded from this? He acknowledges that it's not going to be the anti-Semitic and racist people that are dissuaded. It's going to be the people who are more neutral or even left-leaning that are going to be embarrassed, and that this is going to dissuade them from exploring or espousing such theories. Okay. So just a simple analogy here. You could take any religion and just pick Christianity and Islam. Christianity has some epistemic qualities that are similar to conspiracy theories, if you think about it. And some Christians surely hold racist and anti-Semitic right-wing views. Should we out all Christians for their association with racist ones? Should we out moderate Muslims for their association with extremists? And their association really seems to amount to little more than falling under the same heading in some respect. You've got sort of right-wing conspiracy theorists over here, and you've got left-wing conspiracy theorists over here, and linguistically they fall under the same title of conspiracy theories, so they're associated, and that seems to be how it's supposed to work. So Cassam has a response to this kind of objection, and it's worth reading. He says, while it may seem unfair to condemn non-racist conspiracy theories for the sins of racist conspiracy theorists, the issue of guilt by association is much more complicated than it seems. So notice that he admits that what he is doing is guilt by association, but it's okay because it's complicated. There's a sense in which, by endorsing conspiracy theories, one can't help associating oneself with the political causes that these theories have traditionally promoted. But the question is, what are these theories? And what does it mean to endorse conspiracy theories? People do not endorse conspiracy theories in a general sense. They endorse particular conspiracy theories, even if they endorse a lot of them. So let's take, for example, there's the JFK research community and the 9/11 truth community. And there's a lot of people who have counter narratives about COVID-19, many of which are um, um, described as conspiracy theories, whether they really involve positing conspiracy or not, but they do seem maybe to suggest some kind of a cover up or coordinated dishonesty or something. So anyway, in all of these types of conspiracy theories, um, and I listen to podcasts and follow people on Twitter and other places, and it seems like there are a lot of people in these groups. I follow these kinds of groups because these are the kinds of conspiracy theories that I think are worth taking seriously. Unlike a lot of conspiracy theory theorists who seem to be interested in why people believe weird things, I'm not interested in that. So those people tend to look for the weirdest conspiracy theories. I tend to look for the conspiracy theories that I think um, might be true or onto something. Um, so anyway, there's a lot of these people, and from my observation, they all, or the vast majority of them, seem to be, as far as you can tell, sincerely concerned about the truth, um, and um, there's some exceptions in the 9/11 truth community, but mostly they reject Holocaust denialism, right, and other apparently racist and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Okay, so this is a large group of people or groups of people, right? It seems that these theories that are mentioned above there should mean the theories that the people actually endorse, not the theories that they reject. And a lot of these theories, well, the JFK and the other assassinations of the 60s and the 9/11 and other false flag type conspiracy theories, they seem to be associated with civil rights and anti-war agendas. And also, not killing leftist leaders. How is it that people who flirt with such theories are problematically associating themselves with the political causes traditionally promoted by the theories they reject? Well, again, Cassam has an answer to that. Um, Conspiracy theories symbolize a particular worldview, he says, that has always scapegoated and demonized particular groups of people. And here he introduces the idea that the Confederate flag symbolizes support for slavery and racism. And he says, you don't get to decide what things mean, right? Um, that flag has this meaning. And similarly, or analogously, conspiracy theories signal right-wing racism and anti-Semitism. You individual, maybe even leftist-leaning conspiracy theorist, you don't get to decide what things mean. Conspiracy theories mean that. Well, here's the problem with that analysis, I think. The Confederate flag is a particular flag. Conspiracy theories is not a particular theory, it's a big group of theories. So really how this should work is Confederate flags, or the Confederate flag symbolizes support for slavery and racism, but flags do not necessarily symbolize support for slavery and racism. That depends on the individual flag. Analogously, racist conspiracy theories signal support for racism, but conspiracy theories do not necessarily support racism or signal support for racism. It depends on the particular conspiracy theory. And at one point early in the book, Cassam actually comes close to acknowledging this. He says, their basic function is to advance a political or ideological objective. Okay. be it opposition to gun control, anti-Semitism, hostility to the federal government, or whatever. I think that's right, or whatever. Um, or, civil rights. Like I said, not killing leftist leaders, an anti-war agenda, right? Um, so each particular theory has its own particular function. And so these kinds of conspiracy theories, the MLK, RFK, JFK, they don't, they shouldn't be tarred with this association with anti-Semitic theories, because that's really not relevant to them, I submit. Okay, let's take a look at a couple quotations. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I think this is kind of revealing. So 9/11 conspiracy theorists are often left-leaning, or some of them are, but they might not realize, Cassam says, how conspiracy theories have been used to promote right-wing or anti-Semitic causes, right? And so the idea is we should out them as right-wing propaganda, and so reveal that they are unwittingly aligning themselves with a political outlook that they find repugnant, right? And so we do this by repeating the history of conspiracy theories. But again, which history should we repeat? I mean, Cassam wants to repeat the anti-Semitic history, but we should be repeating the history that is relevant to the particular theories in question. Also, looking down at the second quotation here, Cassam formulates his point a little bit differently here and less problematically. He says the only way to respond to conspiracy theories is to criticize the ideology, because the ideology, so the conspiracy theory is part of a larger theory, right? The ideology, right? And you've got to tackle that larger theory. I actually think that's okay, but I mean it's legitimate, but you have to address the right ideology, the one that's particularly relevant to the theory. So, for example, again, think of the assassination of Martin Luther King, right? And what's the ideology driving that conspiracy theory? And okay, the other assassinations, and let's throw in some false flag theories. The ideology behind that might be something like, again, an anti-war, don't kill leftist leaders, and maybe even a civil rights kind of ideology behind there. And maybe a person who wants to confront this kind of conspiracy theorist might want to say, look, I think your anti-war idealism and your bitterness about how things turned after those assassinations is clouding your judgment with respect to your analysis of the evidence in terms of these theories, and that you're being biased by this larger ideology. I think that's fair game, right? I think that's not inappropriate to bring that up, and that could be discussed. But to bring up anti-Semitism and some other conspiracy theories that are not really involved, I don't think that is relevant. Let me just quickly mention some of the other history. If we're talking about which history could be relevant here, we could think about the history of Watergate and Iran-Contra In terms of assassinations, we could think of the actual, planned assassinations of Castro, and we could think of the murder of Fred Hampton and Patrice Lumumba. We could think of the Phoenix program regarding false flag events. We could think of Operation Himmler and the Mukden incident and Operation Gladio. In terms of promotion of war, we could think of the Gulf of Tonkin and the lies used to support the Gulf War. We could also think of COINTELPRO and MK Ultra. There's a lot of things we could think of in terms of relevant history, and a lot of it or doesn't support racism or anti-Semitism, or even right wing. All right, shifting gears here a little bit, I just want to reflect on kind of the current situation. So take the lab leak. Some people are presumably motivated by a racist desire to blame China in believing the lab leak, right? At least, people are being accused of that. And again, probably there are some people who are motivated in that way, but many others clearly are not. I mean, I know that from, or I know that at least some are not through introspection. So should the latter group be outed as racists because of their association with the former? The association merely being that they both kind of support the same theory. But just because somebody's a racist and supports a theory, that doesn't mean that that theory isn't worth investigating. Of course, as a particularist, I think that all conspiracy theories should be judged on their own particular merits. Now, this idea of appealing to feelings and emotions. So this is only a very general. This isn't his specific idea, but it's a general sort of strategy, communication strategy that we see almost ubiquitously. So here's a quotation, which is from a group that advises the British government, and they recommend using hard-hitting emotional messaging to try to amp up the fear to get people to do what they think should be done. I don't think this is the right approach at all. I think minds should be changed, if at all, by appeal to reason, and that manipulative strategies, in fact, will, in the long run, undermine credibility and therefore backfire. And that leads me to my final point, which is the Confucian critique. In Confucianism, there is this idea of the exemplary person. And the exemplary person represents kind of a model of proper conduct. And even the uncultivated person is able to recognize something there and be inspired by it and aspire to emulate it. Right? And for Confucians, this is really key to social harmony, the ability for the elite, and we can, in this case, maybe think about ostensible epistemic authorities, for them to really serve as persuasive models without being coercive. But Lao Tzu has a critique. Lao Tzu, the Taoist, has a critique of this. And I've modified this quotation slightly to make it about reason rather than ritual. But he's basically saying that this doesn't work in practice. It doesn't work because this is what he says. The man of reason makes his case, but when no one listens, he rolls up his sleeves and resorts to persuasion by other means. And this is essentially what Cassam is doing. He'd like to be able to persuade people to go along with official stories, but they're not convinced. And so he's resorting to manipulative strategies and appeals to emotion and other sort of non-epistemic strategies to move people. And so the Confucian response to this is a self-reflection. I think it's worth noting here that if we think about the idea that all of the evidence, supposedly, and all of the good arguments are on Cassam's side against the conspiracy theorist, according to Cassam, right? And if that's the case, they have all the evidence on their side, all the good arguments are on their side, and by the way, all of the money, or most of it, right, and all the power, the government, the mass media, all of that is on their side too. With all of that on their side, and they're still not able to convince people. I think that's a cause for self-reflection and asking, why is it that I failed to be persuasive? Now, in the Confucian text, the Xunzi was the third of the three great Confucians of the classical period. He says that everybody wants to be honored, but the best way to end up being honored is to be honorable, right? And so we can say similarly that the best way to be regarded as reliable is to be reliable. The best way to be regarded as credible is to be credible. And so the proper response to not being regarded as convincing is to be more worthy of trust, right? Not less worthy of trust, right? And by using manipulative extra epistemic strategies, that just, people will see through that, and that will undermine in the long run efforts to be persuasive. Okay, so I suggest, contra Cassam, that what we should do is take the high road. We should reason with people. We shouldn't manipulate them. We should treat conspiracy theories according to their particular epistemic merits, not try to smear them by, suggesting a relation that doesn't exist. And that's it.
Thank you, Kurtis, for a wonderful talk. We've already got 2 questions in the chat, and actually I'm going to put a note on Charles's first question here, because I think my comment and Charles's comment are kind of related here. One thing to note about where Cassam gets his history of anti-Semitism is from Jovan Byford, who kind of bakes into his definition of conspiracy theory, that conspiracy theories only first arrive during the first glorious French Revolution. They're anti-Semitic by their very origin. And I think both Byford and Cassam are going, look, the genetic lineage of the conspiracy theory goes all the way back to the French Revolution. They were anti-Semitic then, so any version of it today inherits that through some kind of transitional property. And so Charles goes pre-modern. What does he mean by this? A possibility. Modernity consists in recognizing the reality of invisible hand explanations as opposed to hidden hand conspiratorial and mighty hand explanations. Things happen because of the explicit decisions of the people in charge. So modernity begins with the Enlightenment, and that's where I hang my comment on with the French Revolution, and specifically the Scottish Enlightenment. So a pre-modern conspiracy theory is a theory that would only be plausible if you systematically neglect the possibility of invisible hand explanations. But in that case, many of his target theories are not pre-modern in the sense. Comment?
Okay, so that's a lot. Right, and I also think that yeah, I'm not sure that he means pre-modern in that sense. I teased out a couple different meanings of pre-modern from what he had said, um, and um, I believe I took it again. This was handled in my other paper, but I believe I took it to be kind of similar to like the conspiracy theory of society, where the pre-modern idea would be that you got forces of control kind of controlling everything. But I don't think he really necessarily stuck to that. Sometimes pre-modern just meant for him um, that there was a that it represented a a different it a it changed I forget the phrase that he used, but it changed the meaning of the event. But there's nothing particularly pre-modern about that. I mean, if it's a different actor that you're positing for doing the crime, then that, yeah, okay, that could change the meaning of the event, but it's not nothing really problematic or pre-modern about that. So those were my thoughts about the whole pre-modern idea.
Our second question comes from Kurt, who says, why do you support the lab leak theory? Do you think it is a possible explanation or a likely explanation if I interpreted that passing remark correctly?
Yeah, I think it's likely, and I think it's, in fact, very likely. And look, I don't know a lot about it. Um, I know that there's a book about it by somebody I follow on Twitter that looks to be probably pretty good. But the main reason for me from the beginning was just the proximity, the chances of it um, arising right next to the lab. I mean, it's basically John Stewart's critique, I think, is essentially right. I mean, that doesn't get you all the way, but it's been 2 years, and if that's wrong, you'd expect that they'd have some evidence piling up in favor of the other theory. It doesn't seem to be happening. There's certainly no reason it couldn't be a lab leak. I mean, lab leaks happen all the time. Apparently, um, there are viruses that could have been the source of this that were handled not just in the level 4 lab, but the level 2 lab there. So it's not at all implausible that that could have happened.
And we have time for one more question. And Brian, our co-host, would like to raise a question. So Brian, if you want to just ask that live, that would be great.
Yeah, no, Kurtis, it was great talk. And I know that you've got a book coming out soon. And I'm curious what the relationship is between this talk and what's going to be in that book. In particular, I'm interested in the final, the Confucian critique, I think is really new and interesting, and curious, is that going to be in the book? And
No, this was all basically, so the book, I've just finished the page proofs and sent them in and the index a few days ago. So that was the last thing on that. But this presentation was written over the last few weeks, and no, none of this is in the book. The only thing I have on Cassam in the book is I do have a few pages critiquing his early article on conspiracy theories.
do you want to say anything about what is in the book, just so people will be on the lookout for it?
Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, it should be out in August, I think. It's called Conspiracy Theories and the Failure of Intellectual Critique. And it's broken into 3 parts. The first part is on the philosophy of conspiracy theories. The second part is a critique of, it's a 3-chapter critique of Sunstein's, Sunstein and Vermeule's article. And then the third part, which is 4 chapters, is on the psychology literature, or not just the social science literature in general, and looking at what I take to be problems in that literature.